Hi all, this is Allmighty and welcome to this video. So today, once again, I'm going to show you a game featuring Raul Capablanca. Once again, we are also at the St. Petersburg tournament of 1914. It is round 3 and he is playing against Akiba Rubinstein. So in round 1, we have seen that an amazing victory against Aaron Nimzovich, that idea ahead of its time, where Capablanca just clearly gives up a pawn and has an enormous attack on the open A and B file using that bishop on g7. So quite an amazing game. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. And okay, in round 2, Capablanca played against Frank Marshall. It was a game essentially without a fired bullet, a lot of exchanges, which essentially led to a drawish game. So I decided not to feature this one. But now we are at round 3, where Capablanca is playing against Akiba Rubinstein, the guy who he said personally that he thinks is going to be the next challenger to Emmanuel Lasker, so for the World Championship title, and definitely a player that he has a lot of respect for. We have already seen some games played against the two, but now in 1914, Capablanca is definitely increased his strength, and Rubinstein is definitely on, I would say, on top of his form. So let's just see what do they have in store for us. Here, Rubinstein starts with d4. Also, I think that this is something that we already covered in the game between them. Rubinstein starts with d4, and Capablanca responds quite normally for him, d5. Knight to f3 and knight to f6. We have c4, and of course the queen's gambit declined. Capablanca always tried to play similar openings and openings that he finds himself knowing of the main ideas, because as you all know, he wasn't an opening expert, but he is more focused on the middle game and on the end game. So Rubinstein continues knight to c3, knight from b to d7, and bishop to g5, bishop to e7, e3, and castles. And now a rook to c1. So a pretty standard stuff for white here, and here Capablanca plays rook to e8. So not something that you would see very often nowadays. You would see something like c6 or maybe b6, trying to start some development on the queen side, or just with c6 playing into a very stable center. But with rook to e8 is a bit inaccurate, but white definitely needs to take advantage of it. And Rubinstein, the player that he is of course one of the guys who is very theoretical. He is very familiar with his opening, but he is also an amazing player in the middle game and in the end game. So let's see what he had in store for Capablanca here. Queen to c2. So continuing, and c6 now, bishop to d3, Capablanca captures on c4, bishop captures on c4, and now b5. So very similar to the standard opening line, but with this rook on e8. Bishop goes back on d3, and just so you know, at any point Capablanca could have just played simply h6 and removed the threat of this bishop and this queen, actually capturing, so removing all sorts of threats there. But he decided not to do that, and now after this move a6, he is essentially one move too late. Here Rubinstein finds the way how to actually take advantage of this position. And I also wanted to feature this game if you are new for the in the systems, playing the system, so the queen's gambit declined, the Slav, the semi-Slav, you would quite often find yourself in situations like this. And here, not having the bishop on b7 and losing one tempo with rook to e8, here white can play knight to e5. So if knight captures on e5, pawn captures on e5, this knight has to move, you will exchange bishops, and you will capture on h7, where black loses a pawn. And if you don't do that, what Capablanca played in the game, he played bishop to b7. After a couple of exchanges, knight to d7, queen to d7, bishop to f6, bishop to f6, quite simply, you lose a pawn. And that is something that happened in the game. It isn't something that can be avoided. So just by playing wrongly in the opening, something that Capablanca wasn't the guy who actually went through opening lines and prepared himself. He was, yeah, in the end, sometimes you would have to you would end up in a situation like this, where an opponent on the other side knows the opening better than you, and essentially just because of that you lose your pawn, and from the beginning of the game you find yourself in a worse position. Here king to h8 is played, and now Rubinstein is in a very good position. He has a chance against Capablanca. He has a healthy pawn up, and he needs to find the winning plan. Here, okay, essentially he didn't find. Okay, he did manage to continue the game. Okay, he decided that he wanted to go for a technical advantage, that he will just quite easily go into the endgame where he has a pawn, but of course Capablanca wouldn't let him to do that. Here, what he needed to do to actually seal the winning advantage, he should have played knight to e4. And with knight to e4, you are doing a couple of things. Okay, of course, you are not giving up your bishop, because after that, knight to f6, and black loses a queen. First thing that you do, you attack this bishop, but black can even in some variations give it up, because after this bishop moves, opening this file, maybe this could be something. But okay, definitely black doesn't want to do that now that he is a pawn up, and also mess up his pawn structure in front of the king. So you kind of force playing something like queen to e7 or bishop to e7. But after that, for example, if queen to e7, there is this knight to c5 move, which essentially removes this bishop out of the game. You can play g6, bishop captures, pawn captures, and queen captures. But now, okay, you are a piece up, you have the bishop pair, but this bishop doesn't make sense. And you have to play something like bishop to g7 or rook to f8 in order to have this bishop defended. If you don't do that, knight capture on b7, queen has to capture on b7, and then you lose the bishop back. And now the plan is simple for white. f4, castles, rook to f3, rook to h3. And there isn't much that black can do. With playing f4 immediately, you stop something like e5. Okay, black can play it, but this way he just gives up a pawn. And yeah, white is just quite simply winning, even though he is a piece down. So I just wanted to go over this variation because it is something that can happen if you are playing against an unexperienced player with a Queen's Gambit declined. So yeah, this is something that can happen, but didn't happen in the game, because after all of these exchanges, bishop to e4 was played. And it is a natural move. You put the bishop on this very long diagonal, and you just continue with the game. e5 by Capablanca. Now it's time to open up the position, because the king is still in the center. Pawn captures and rook captures. Now we have castles and queen to e7. The threat is b4, the knight has to move, and then you lose the bishop. So here bishop to f3 was played. And now rook to c5. Once again, b4 is a threat, and Capablanca in this situation didn't want to play c5 immediately to exchange the bishop pair. He still wanted to exchange a little bit more pieces. So in a sense, Capablanca is here trying to equalize the position. Now queen to e2 because of b4, and we have bishop captures on c3. Rook captures, and pawn captures. And after all this, now Capablanca finally has some room for counterplay, because as you can see, even though these pawns are on light squares and white has a light square bishop, the situation is that white is a pawn down on the queen side, and his pawn structure is messed up. So this gives a possibility Capablanca in some situations to maybe go for a passed pawn. And this is the only thing he has going for him. And he goes about this idea. First rook to d8, putting the rook on the open file, and rook to d1, because you cannot give your opponent an open file. Rook captures and queen captures, and now first king to g8. A king to g8 is a move that comes actually with an idea. h4 is played. You cannot capture with the queen, because after queen to d7 you cannot defend your bishop. So a bit of a tempting move here by Rubinstein, but of course Capablanca wouldn't fall for something like that. And only now c5. And why you will see now why you couldn't have played it a move ago, even though you could, but Capablanca probably didn't want to calculate all the moves. Here queen to b7, and now there is no queen to h5 check, because the king is now on g8. If queen to h5 check, king to g8, you have queen to c5. But okay, if we go back, let me just show you so that you know. If c5 is played immediately and you have this variation, you can capture the queen, but now there is queen to e4, which essentially holds everything. Queen to b1 is a threat. With checkmate, of course, you have to play something like king to f1, h3, or something like that, and you will lose the a2 pawn. So all in all, it will be the same, but okay, this is a safer route, so to speak. After king to g8, now playing c5 and exchanging bishops. And now you're in a queen's endgame with a pawn up with white. But the thing is, black is probably the one who will create a pass pawn much sooner, and it is something that he needs to do. So after queen to d6, we see a move such as b4, and now this is actually the critical moment in the game. Do you actually want to go for an 80 move game with white pieces trying to find the winning continuation? Of course, you can do that, so depending on your mood and the situation you're in, it is round 3. Definitely it would be a very nice win against a player such as Capablanca. A move that would probably give you opportunities such as that one is c4 here, because you don't want to give black an opportunity to create a pass pawn. Once he creates a pass pawn on the queen side, white cannot win the game anymore, because essentially you have to take a look. So you have to look after the black's pawn, and if you don't do that, of course he will promote and you will lose the game. But in the end, you will have to give checks, and this is like the only thing that you can do. Here c4 is played quite simply with an idea of not allowing any advances with black. If a5, queen to d8 check, picks up the pawn. If b3 exchanges, and you can pick up on a6 and you defend your pawn. So not allowing black to actually go further. He has to play something like queen to c8 and defend this pawn. And now, okay, you can go about looking into this position, and this is actually the position I wanted to stop in and maybe encourage you, if you're by any means interested in improving your knowledge of the queen's endgame, to put this position on the table and try to find the best moves for white. Of course, me personally, I'm not going to do that in this video. I already did it on the side, so to try and improve my knowledge, of course, with the engine and with the remarks of the old masters like Keres and Kasparov, it is definitely useful to look at this position and try to find the best way how to continue with white here, since he is a player which is a pawn up in this situation. Okay, so you can do that, but of course you don't have to. If I would do that in this video, it would last for 30 minutes or longer, so I definitely don't want to do this for you. Maybe in some other situation, but for now, yeah, just leave it as it is. But remember, if you want to improve your knowledge, definitely this is a position you should take a look into. Okay, but here Rubinstein didn't play c4, and he actually went quite quickly into a drawish position. He captured on c5, pawn captures here, queen to c3, queen to b1, king to h2, and now queen to a2. And after this is a situation that I was talking about. Black has a passed pawn, the queen is in front of it, so white queen cannot do much about it. It is a draw. The white queen has to give a lot of checks, and in the end it is just like that, a draw, even though you have 4 pawns against 2 pawns on the king side. So the game continued with queen to c8 check, king to h7, queen to f5 check. g6 now, you cannot capture because the queen is defending, and now queen to f6, a5, g4, a4, h5, and now pawn captures on h5, and first check, king to g7, queen to g5, king to h7, queen to h5, king to g7, and in this position they agreed to a draw, because Rubinstein sees that he can only give checks to Capablanca, and Capablanca sees that he cannot run away. He can just move in front of the pawn, and when white decides not to give a check, he can push the pawn. So yeah, this is pretty much it for this video. I wanted to show you that interesting line in the queen's gambit declined, and also I thought interesting to show you this position in the queen's endgame. That being said, I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time.